In World War II, victory did not come from the seas alone, nor from the trenches, nor from the thunder of tanks rolling across continents. Victory came from the skies, from engines screaming at 20,000 feet, from pilots barely out of their teens, from metal machines pushed beyond their limits, and from the soldiers, airmen, and crews who lived and died inside them. Today, we're going to explore every major aircraft used by U.S. forces in World War II. Not just what they were, but how they fought, who flew them, and why they became legends in the greatest conflict humanity has ever faced. This is the complete story of America's warbirds. This is every aircraft U.S. soldiers used in World War II. If you had to choose one aircraft to symbolize America's aerial dominance late in the war, it would be the sleek, razor-nosed killer known as the P-51 Mustang. But here's the twist most people don't know. The P-51 didn't begin as an American idea at all. It was originally designed for Britain in a desperate plea to get more fighters in the sky. When America fitted it with the legendary Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the aircraft transformed. Suddenly, the Mustang could fly further, faster, and higher than anything the Luftwaffe could scramble. It escorted American bombers deep into enemy territory, Berlin, Munich, Ploesti, places no Allied fighter had ever flown to and returned from. Pilots said its long wings felt like a handshake from God. The Germans called it the little friend, because when Mustangs showed up, bombers lived. If the Mustang was a rapier, the P-47 Thunderbolt was a sledgehammer. It was huge, bigger than many bombers from the early war. Heavy, armored, and almost impossible to kill. Its radial engine could take hits that would down any other fighter. Some P-47s returned to base with cylinders shot clean off. But the Thunderbolt's true talent? Ground attack. With bombs, rockets, and 8.50 caliber machine guns, a single Thunderbolt could tear a railway line apart, shred a convoy, or blast open a panzer column. On D-Day and beyond, Thunderbolts became the angels of the infantry, providing close support that saved thousands of Allied lives. Before Mustangs and Thunderbolts ruled the skies, America had the P-40 Warhawk. This was the fighter flown by the legendary Flying Tigers, volunteers who battled Japanese forces over China even before the U.S. entered the war. Its iconic shark mouth became a symbol of American defiance. It wasn't the fastest. It wasn't the highest flying. But it was tough, reliable, and deadly in the hands of the right pilot. And when Pearl Harbor fell, it was the P-40 that scrambled first. It was the aircraft of America's first counterpunch. 2 engines, twin booms, a cockpit in the middle. The P-38 Lightning didn't look like a fighter. It looked like a spaceship that landed 20 years early. The Germans named it the fork-tailed devil. Why? Because it was fast, powerful, and incredibly versatile. It could intercept, recon, and dive with terrifying speed. It was a P-38 that intercepted and shot down the aircraft carrying Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind of Pearl Harbor. In the Pacific, no American fighter scored more kills. When U.S. Marines needed the ultimate close-air support aircraft in the Pacific, they called the F-4U Corsair. With its inverted gull wings and massive propeller, it looked like a bird of prey. The Japanese called it Whistling Death. It launched from carriers, fought Zeros in twisting dogfights, and strafed beaches during island-to-island campaigns. It became the Marines' most beloved aircraft, and one of the longest-serving fighters in U.S. history. The B-17 Flying Fortress was exactly what its name promised, a flying castle of guns and armor. It carried up to 13 heavy machine guns, turning the sky around it into a lethal sphere of lead. Stories of B-17s returning home are legendary. Planes with tails blown off, wings shredded, engines on fire, crews wounded, yet still limping back to England. But the B-17 did more than survive. It pounded German industry day after day, wearing down the Nazi war machine. The crews? Young, often scared, but they climbed into freezing, open bomb bays at 20,000 feet because they believed their mission could end the war. If the B-17 was the star, the B-24 Liberator was the engine behind the entire strategic bombing campaign. It flew faster, carried more bombs, and had longer range. It wasn't as charming as the B-17, but it did more missions, more roles, and more hard work than almost any other bomber in the war. From the heat of North Africa, to the jungles of Burma, to the coral airstrips of the Pacific, the B-24 was there, always. Its most famous mission? The daring low-altitude strike on the Ploesti oil fields, one of the most dangerous air raids in history. Some aircraft become legends not for what they were, but for what they did. The B-25 Mitchell became a symbol of American resilience after it launched from an aircraft carrier, something it wasn't designed to do, for the Doolittle raid on Tokyo in 1942. It was the first time Japanese soil felt American bombs. The raid didn't cripple Japan's industry, but it electrified American morale and shook Japanese confidence. The B-25 went on to fight across the Pacific, strafing ships, bombing airfields, and flying some of the most daring low-level missions of the entire war. At first, pilots feared the B-26 Marauder. It was fast, too fast, many said. Landings were unforgiving. Early crash rates were terrifying. It earned dark nicknames, including the Widowmaker. But once crews mastered it, the B-26 became one of the safest, most effective medium bombers in the entire Allied arsenal. By war's end, it had the lowest combat loss rate of any American bomber in Europe. A rocky start, a triumphant finish. Then came the giant, the aircraft that changed everything. The B-29 Superfortress. Pressurized cabins, remote-controlled gun turrets, enormous range, and the ability to carry the largest bomb load of any aircraft in the world. This was the bomber that brought firestorms to Japanese cities, fought at altitudes the enemy couldn't reach, and ultimately carried out the missions that ended the war. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the Enola Gay, and Boxcar. The B-29 didn't just help win the war. It reshaped history itself. When the U.S. Navy needed an answer to the agile Japanese Zero, they created a monster, the F-6 Hellcat. Rugged, fast, deadly, easy to fly, and capable of absorbing massive punishment. Hellcats shot down over 5,000 Japanese aircraft, more than any other Allied fighter in the Pacific. It became the backbone of the U.S. carrier fleet, the sword of the Navy. If a single aircraft changed the fate of the Pacific, it was the humble SBD Dauntless. This slow, outdated dive bomber should have been obsolete. Instead, it delivered the decisive blow of the Pacific War. At Midway, Dauntless pilots sank 4 Japanese aircraft carriers in a single day. 4. The wings of the Japanese Empire were broken by men who dove through flak and fire in an old aircraft that refused to die. The TBF Avenger was a torpedo bomber designed to do the impossible, fly straight at enemy ships under the guns of the most powerful navy in the world. Torpedo runs were nightmares. Machine gun fire raking the cockpit, shells bursting in the water, ships turning to avoid torpedoes. Most aircraft didn't make it back, but the Avenger earned its name. It fought through the Coral Sea, Midway, Guadalcanal, and Leyte Gulf, sinking ships and surviving missions that would have destroyed lesser planes. A young pilot named George H.W. Bush, future U.S. president, flew one. Some aircraft kill the enemy. Others win the war. The C-47 Skytran, known as the Dakota to the British, was the aircraft that carried paratroopers into Normandy, towed gliders, delivered supplies, and hauled the wounded home. Without the C-47, the Allied advance across Europe would have been impossible. It was the aircraft that fed armies, built bridges through the air, and kept the front lines alive. Small, light, slow, unarmed. The L-4 Grasshopper looked like a toy plane, but it was one of the most important aircraft in the war. It was used for reconnaissance, artillery spotting, and rescue missions. Because it could land anywhere, fields, roads, beaches, it gave commanders real-time eyes on the battlefield. Artillery accuracy skyrocketed thanks to this tiny, vulnerable, brave little machine. The PBY Catalina was a flying boat, massive, slow, and graceful. It hunted submarines, rescued downed pilots, and patrolled thousands of miles of open ocean. It was a Catalina that spotted the Japanese fleet at Midway. It was Catalinas that plucked countless airmen from the Pacific, giving them a second chance at life. If the ocean had angels, they were painted navy blue. The C-46 Commando was built for the worst flights on Earth, carrying supplies over the hump, the deadly air route over the Himalayas. Snow, icy winds, zero visibility, enemy fighters, and mountains higher than many pilots had ever flown. The C-46 kept China supplied, no matter the cost. From tiny scout planes to mighty superfortresses, from dive bombers screaming toward ships, to fighters clawing for altitude at dawn. These aircraft shaped the course of the war, and the world we live in today. American soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen flew them under fire, risked everything, and wrote a chapter of history in the smoke of dogfights and the roar of engines. When the war ended, many were scrapped, some were forgotten, but their legacy lives in every airport, every cockpit, every contrail across the sky. Because in World War II, the United States learned something powerful. Control the skies, and you control the war.